Greetings and welcome to A Contemplative Reader, where together we will explore the mysterious, the mystical, the spiritual, the otherworldly, and the transcendent in various books and literature. Today I'm going to go through the science fiction, fantasy, and graphic novels that I read in January plus a few days into February. First, the novels that I finished. The three novels that I finished all come from the series by Orson Scott Card, The Tales of Alvin Maker. First book, The Seventh Son. Second book, The Red Prophet. And the third book, Prentice, Alvin. So this was a series that was recommended to me by a professor of literature who specializes in fantasy, Paul Williams. And I did not know of this series. I knew of Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, but I didn't know of this book series, which was started in the late 1980s and deals with the intersection of folk magic with an alternate history timeline of early America. So what you have here in this alternate history is you have the South essentially has remained under the jurisdiction of England, so they're called the Crown Colonies. But then you have the early United States, you have New England, you still have French Canada, you have territories still under the control of Native American tribes. And then in the middle of all that, you have the frontier, where the European settlers are moving west into that land of the Native American tribes. So the first book, The Seventh Son, is what I would call the religious book, in that it deals with the tensions between folk magic and the characters in the story who are what I would call fairly strict Calvinist Presbyterian Christians with great names such as the Reverend Philadelphia Thrower and Armor of God Weaver. At any rate, Alvin is born, I think, 30 pages into the story, and it's one of those gripping narratives I have ever read, where you've got these people with these folk magic powers, but also this mysterious power of the Unmaker, this destructive force out there in the cosmos seeking to thwart the birth of the seventh son, Alvin Miller, who would go on to be known as Alvin Maker, contra the Unmaker. So that is kind of just a very brief summary of the first story that goes on to depict Alvin's growth and recognition that he has these folk magic abilities to heal, abilities to manipulate nature in certain ways. So in the second book is what I would call The Red Prophet, is what I would call the mystical text. Just a little review on the back indicates that it's harsher, bleaker, and more mystical than Seventh Son, and that is all very, very true. Here you have Alvin as a young boy who deals with Native American mystics, one particular mystic who he intersected with in the Seventh Son is the Shining Man. Now becomes this mystical leader of a certain segment of the Native Americans in the region. And the story goes on to have this great conflagration, this great conflict between the European settlers of this region and the various political machinations of the characters involved who manipulate behind the scenes to try and create this conflict between the Native Americans and the settlers, including the Miller family. And what I also appreciated about this story, in addition to the mystical nature of it, the incredible description of mystical experiences between Alvin and this Native American prophet, is this particular book, The Red Prophet, also goes into the effects of trauma on the individual, trauma on a culture, trauma on from generation to generation. Deeply moving parts of this story. So going on then into the third book, So we've had the religious book, the mystical book, and this is what I would call the metaphysical book, Prentice, Alvin. Alvin moves on as a young adult now to be a, young boy and into young adulthood, because he's with this blacksmith for several years. He's an apprentice learning to be a blacksmith in a neighboring town. And I call this the metaphysical book because it is here in this story where Alvin learns how his folk magic abilities really intersects with the physical world, in the sense that he can get down into the atomic or even subatomic level and manipulate things in nature, whether it is things like rocks or inanimate objects, or also into living beings. But I won't say more in order to not spoil the story. This book deals into the horrors of slavery, which continued on, particularly in the Crown colonies of the South, in this alternate history timeline, but very much reflected what actually happened in United States history as we know it, where there were hunts after escaped slaves, and there's, again, interesting intersection with religion in this, which reflects the story of Abraham and Hagar, if you know that story from Genesis of the Bible, and relations between the European settlers and the African American slaves at that time, and how their offspring are kind of at the center of this particular story. So I've really enjoyed this story so far. Soon I will be discussing this series with Paul Williams, who again recommended the series to me, as well as with Sam of the channel iSamwise. So the books that I started but did not finish in January and the first couple of days of February would be the fourth book of the series, Tales of Alvin Maker, Alvin Journeyman. So again, you can follow the titles of this story. He went from being an apprentice in book 3, and now he's a journeyman in book 4. I continue to read my reread of Claw the Conciliator, the second book in the Book of the New Sun. This book, it proves to be more of a challenge for me. I read it, listened to it via audiobook last year, and I wanted to reread it before I do my deep dive into this book, and I'm just reading a chapter here and there. It is a more difficult story for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into. Not saying I don't enjoy it, because I enjoy everything by Gene Wolfe that I read, but it is difficult to tackle. I've also started Gormenghast, which is the second book by Mervyn Peake in the Gormenghast trilogy. Again, you can find my discussion with Philip Chase about the first book of the series, Titus Grown, on his channel. At some point, we will be discussing Gormenghast. So far, in what I've read, it picks up right where the first book left off, with its atmospheric descriptions of the various eccentric characters of Castle Gormenghast. Kind of the book that I started reading in January that was not on my radar screen is Alien, the novelization of the first Alien movie, and the novelizations by Alan Dean Foster. I've been watching Alien Earth, which is a TV series which came out late last year on Hulu, the streaming channel Hulu. And it occurred to me that why have I not been paying more attention to the Alien universe the last several years? Because this story encapsulates a modern version of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, but also with some great themes related to class, related to corporate oligarchies, related to the intersection between AI and human existence, with the synthetic characters in the story, along with just some great action and excitement that goes along with the series. Again, so I thought I'd just start by, at the very beginning, it's been a long time since I've seen the original Alien movie, And so I thought I would just start by reading the novelization, which I read as a kid a long time ago. You can see from the creases in the book. It's even got my name that I wrote in this particular edition of it as a kid. So I'm looking forward to delving deeper into the alien universe. So I think those are the books that I started in January. Then I have also started reading, or gone back to reading, more short stories and novellas. I have found that reading these great big chonkers, as they call it here on BookTube, fantasy novels, sometimes burns me out. So it helps if I just periodically read a short story, whether fantasy or science fiction. And as I mentioned in a YouTube short that I put up a few weeks ago, I was so moved by the tribute videos to booktuber Sean Standfast, who recently passed away, and his favorite author, Clifford D. Simak, 20th century science fiction writer from the Midwestern United States, that I thought and I'd never read him before. So I picked up for like $1 on a Kindle a collection of 100 Simak short stories and novels, and I read through 4 of them. And I would actually call them novellas. They're not just short stories of a few pages. Just describe them briefly here. First one, World of the New Sun, from originally published in Wonder Stories of 1931. Here, 2 men build a time machine in the 1930s, thinking they'll just go ahead maybe a few centuries or a few millennia, but they end up going off into the future several million years, and they intersect with this creature who the people of future Earth, which involves a dying sun, I believe, they worship this particular person, but the 2 men in the story, they decide they want to try and get back home to 20th century United States, and I won't spoil the ending of it. It's a classic science fiction of that era, pulpy ending to the story. And these stories are all really fun and pulpy, but also are thought-provoking in some ways. Second story that I read was Mutiny on Mercury, originally published in Wonder Stories in 1932. Here we have Tom Clark as a geologist who is on Mercury, where humans have colonized the planet and used enslaved Martians and moon men to mine this planet, and the story involves a revolt from the slaves against the humans, and Tom Clark's role in that. And then you have Voice in the Void, from originally published in Wonder Stories in 1932, where humans have gone to Mars and they encountered ancient civilizations and religions of prophets and gods and mysterious cultic artifacts. And when the protagonists of this particular story get ensnared in the again, the religious background of this planet, they get into trouble, and the rest of the story is kind of back and forth between Earth and Mars. But the story also delves into efforts to become immortal, what it means to be a human being, and various other subjects like that. Fourth book that or novella that I read from Clifford Simak in January was Hellhounds of the Cosmos, which from its very title you can perhaps glean that here Simak was going into Lovecraftian territory with a cosmic horror story of what it meant for this horrific invasion from the fourth dimension into the world, various parts of the world, and the humans attempt to fight back by developing this machine which can send humans into the fourth dimension on the great horror's own territory, and the battles that ensue there, and the story. Again, just a fun story. I've really enjoyed these stories by Clifford Simak, and I would plan on reading more short fantasy and science fiction stories in the future and give you updates upon that. We'll now go briefly into the graphic novels that I read in January, or just a few of them. Again, if you follow this channel for a while, you know my love for Conan. the Barbarian, originally from Robert E. Howard, but where I intersected with Conan was the 1970s and 1980s Marvel Comics. And then later on, I went back and read the Howard stories. Recently, Titan Comics has acquired the rights to the character Conan and has come up with some new comic series which have been collected into graphic novels. And so I read the first one, Bound in Blackstone, about Conan's battles with this zombie horde and how they come from this mysterious mountain, not really a mountain, but this great stone thing that comes out of the earth, as well as the shamans and the cult figures who create these zombies. Classic Conan action. The artwork in this is just amazing. It harkens back to classic 1970s era Conan. Just you can see this by that image there. I really think there's been a great resurgence in interest on BookTube and Robert E. Howard. And I think if you're not reading some of the graphic novels and comics and other pastiche stories, some of them aren't so good. I get that. But I think if you're not reading those, you're missing out on the Conan saga. Also, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I've gone back into the Alien universe. And there are various Alien graphic novels. I picked up a recent one called Alien Paradiso. These are being published by Marvel Comics. This is just a kind of a fun but horrific. It's kind of the whole description of the alien world, alien cosmos, alien storyline of what happens when xenomorphs invade a resort planet, and where there are mobsters and colonial marines and other characters. So it was kind of a fun little story. So I plan on reading more of those stories in the future. I also read Daredevil Born Again. This was recommended to me by Britton of the channel Some Okie Dude, and we had a great discussion on his channel. No, this was on my channel, actually, about this particular story, which involves themes of death and resurrection. Daredevil's life is torn apart by the political manipulations of the Kingpin, and this is the story of Daredevil's comeback from that. Just a beautifully written story. Really, really enjoyed it. So thank you to Britton. Check out that discussion if you haven't done so already. Some graphic novels that I did start but did not finish. Shay of the channel, Zachary Shay, referred the Saga of the Swamp Thing to me by Alan Moore, classic comic and graphic novel writer. I've enjoyed that so far. Again, delves into issues of what it means to be human and how that intersects with technology. Great stuff there. I'm also going to be discussing, again with Britton, on his channel, this time, the graphic novel Blankets by Craig Thompson. This does not involve horror, superheroes, aliens. It's just a love story, but also intersects with religion, as the author of this story, through this graphic novel, writes of his upbringing in a fundamentalist Christian family and church, and how that has affected his faith. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I look forward to doing so in the next few days and talking with Britton about it on his channel. So anyway, that's my brief reading update from science fiction, fantasy, and graphic novels. I hope to continue doing this roughly every month or so to keep you posted. I'll do other deep dive videos as I've done in the past on particular stories as well. So thank you for watching. Peace be with you.